Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Omen stories tonight. And I think we have everything set up today. Let's hope so. I think I have the camera on. I think today I have my speakers on. I got one speaker here and I got one speaker there. Man, I'm in. Staying alive. Staying alive.
Okay, tell a story then.
Staying alive. Ah. Oh, the audience speaks.
Get it?
Okay. I'm going to give 3 parts to a story. One, you have to know, when you're telling stories, one thing that's wonderful, that I love to hear, is bragging. I love someone that brags. As long as I get my turn. Everyone should brag. Bragging's part of life. Bragging's cool. Today I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite groups. Never was a part of them, but always cherish the idea of potentially being a part of them. And that is, this was after yesterday, the U.S. Marine Corps. Now, the Marines have always, with their pride and their care and their staunch Semper Fi attitude, have always been an ideal for me. Back in the late 50s, early 60s, after I graduated from college, I have a draft notice, and I'll tell you a story later about how it happened. But I ended up going to Pensacola, Florida. And in Pensacola, they have these squadrons. And they have a whole bunch of people that come in to these squadrons. And they're all civilians, except for Marines. Now, the Marines have got their way into Pensacola by hard work and bootstrapping. And they are in awesome physical shape, and they're the top of the Marine Corps field. And they're all getting into aviation. And when I first went in there, they had us running on the beach. And then they had us running in this place that they landed boats, water boats, back in World War II. And we'd run to one side and one to another. And these Marines would run way ahead of us. And then they'd come back, and then you could see them talking together. And I'd run and run, and I'd get to the end, and I'd vomit. And there was about 12 of us of 30 that vomited every time we got to the end. So I thought these Marines talking to each other. And I just said, no, I'm not gonna give up. I won't give up. So I kept running, and the next day, a couple of the kids of those 10 were gone. And the next day, I'd run and I'd run, and I get back to the other side, and 2 more kids had gone. But I was getting in better shape, and I only drive heaved. But these Marines would laugh and sort of look at me. They didn't say much, just a little looked at me, went a little like this, walked away, talked to each other. Well, I was to find out later. They had a pool going on who was going to get kicked out in what order. and I was right on the top. But I fooled him. I made it. Well, we went on in training a little while. And I kept getting a little better shape, a little better shape. So I wasn't really in terrible shape. I was in terrible running shape. Because I worked the truck docks until 3 weeks before I went down to Pensacola. So my muscles were all in order. I just couldn't run. But we went in and they have what they call a smoker. And if anyone saw an officer and a gentleman, they saw the smokers in Pensacola. And they sit us all down there and they said, the master sergeant looked at us because we were trained by Marines. That was my first experience. We were trained by Marines. We had Marine DIs. We had old Marine DIs that had seen it for years. And they say, any of you ever boxed? Well, I looked around, I says, well, I boxed, because I thought about 10 people had raised their hand. I was the only one that had boxed. And he says, you're it, you're the trainer. You're gonna train our whole boxing team for the smoker coming up in a month. You meet here every day at 5:30, right after you're doing everything. Well, I looked around and I said to myself, I boxed. I don't know how to train. I said, I boxed. I'd get in there and I'd sort of swing. And every once in a while I'd win one. But most of the time I got hit a lot. So I went the first day I went up there and I says, and I looked at these guys and they were in great shape. Most of them were Marines. They had 5 out of 6 of them were Marines. So here I was, the fellow that vomited a week and a half ago, training Marines on boxing. And they looked at me and said, you better do a good job. This is our Sergeant Major's last tour. And this is his last smoker. And Roland, you're responsible for making sure we're in shape and win that boxing match. And so I stood up there and I said, I boxed. Oh, so I spent the first day trying to train them. I had no idea how to train anyone. So what I did is I said, okay, I know how to box. So I'll sit down and I'll have them stand next to me and I'll box and they'll watch. And then I'll watch them box. So I'd stand up and they had 6 different weight classes. So I'd get up there and I'd sit there and I'd box, and I got hit a few times, and I says, because they would take these Marines. I mean, you got to admit, these guys had just went through 2 years of super training in the Marines. They were in phenomenal physical shape. And 2 weeks and a half ago, I was vomiting on the field. But I blocked a couple. And then I started showing them how to guard. Well, this wouldn't have been so bad if I had one boxer I had to train, but I had about 10 boxers I had to train, of which 6 of them were going to box in the match. So how was I going to do this? Well, the only way I knew how to do it was to box with them, because that's all I ever did. So I would take the smallest guy first, the 130-pounder, and he and I would box. And man, I did pretty good. I could box with him, and then I'd bring the next one up, the 140-pounder, and I'd box with him. Now you got to think, these guys were pooped out after their minute and a half with me, 2 minutes, and then I was boxing the next one. And then I had the 150-pound one. Well, it went on, and they got bigger and bigger. When the last ones, I was going like this. I'm sure glad they weren't boxers. But this went on every night, except for a few off nights, for a month, for the training. And every day I got in a little better shape. And I'd take the smallest guy and I'd box with him, the next guy I'd box with him, the next guy. And I was out there running, and I wasn't the last anymore. I was second to last. And after about a week of boxing and doing this with 6 boxers, I was third from last. And by the time I was 3/4 of the way through that boxing training, I was third from front. Man, was I in shape. I went from a staunch 165 to 140 in a month. I had never been that thin in my life. But I was training these boxers, and the only way I knew how to box with them. And I was so good at the end that they couldn't hit me. I would just I was like karate Willits. Toot, 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 toot.
Karate Willits.
And they'd all miss me. Well, that's what happened. I got to the end, and I says, man, I should box 140, and I should do pretty good out there, and all my team should do pretty good. You know, they're pretty good. But, you know, they're pretty good. They really have style now. They look good after a month. I was proud to box with these Marines and one Navy. And we finished, and they came to the boxer, and they picked, out of my 10 guys, they picked 6 for the thing. And I was sure I was one of them. They said, Willits, you got 140? He says, Willits, you can't box. You've had prior boxing experience, and none of the other teams have. So I trained for this month. And I trained with 6 guys, and I thought, oh. So I got to watch my boxing team. And I thought about them as my boxing team. And my boxing team got up there, and every one of those 6 guys won their matches. We went out of that smoker being super champions. And I thought they'd come over and grab me and lift me up and carry me around. They walked right by me and grabbed the sergeant major who hadn't been there in a month, lifted him up and walked him around. And I looked and I says, hi, Sergeant Major. You did a good job of putting me on the hook and getting you to train your people. Thank you.
Hey, karate.